Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. In today's episode, we're diving deep into the world of storytelling and branding with our very own marketing director, Jessi from Jill Allen and Associates. She will shed light on how storytelling and branding has evolved, what makes a brand instantly recognizable, and why strong branding is vital for orthodontic practices. If you're looking to refine your brand and create a lasting impression, this conversation is one you won't want to miss. Let's get started. Hey docs, when it comes to marketing, I keep hearing that you're frustrated and that you don't know what you're paying for or even if your marketing efforts are working. Are you wondering what your next marketing move should be? I would suggest you contact Mary Kay Miller and her team at Kaleidoscope. With their free digital marketing audit, you will get answers and solutions to your biggest marketing questions. Go to contactkl.com to request your free digital marketing audit today. When it comes to websites, SEO, and digital advertising, you don't know what you don't know till you know. Find out what you don't know today. That's contactkl.com. Jessi, I am so excited to have you on Hey Docs with me. Thanks for being here today.
Jill, this has been a long time coming, and I am so excited to be a guest on Hey Docs. Thank you for having me. This is going to be the best.
It is, and it's fun that we're doing this little series here. And one of the things that I'm super excited about is I have surrounded myself with some really smart people, and you are one of those really smart people that help make me so successful. And so I'm excited to have you share some of your knowledge with our audience and just give us some insight into what it means with marketing and just some of those things that go into making a practice and a business successful. One of the things I like to do is when we start off Hey Docs is have you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your role here at Jill Allen and Associates.
Yeah, this is something I love to talk about because it's coming up on 10 years. 10 years of you and I working together in March, which I can't even believe. We've done so much together. I know we've grown and learned and just done business together for so long now that this is like my little home. So yeah, so my role with JA&A started 10 years ago, and I was initially hired on as a consultant. And so I spent 5 years on your consulting team, which was, I learned so much about business, about orthodontics, about just how to do things better, internal processes, and spent 5 years doing that and worked up into a management role on the team over there. And then through that period, I was also going to school. And so when I graduated with my bachelor's in creative writing, it made sense for me to take a pivot to what we now deem the marketing side of our company, which was at its infancy at that time. Our marketing had always been done really organically. And so it was a really great thing to be able to step in and put some more thoughtful strategy into what we were doing and how we were going to do it and how we were going to increase our presence in our little niche market. So yeah, I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller. You see my handiwork in our presentations and all of our content and our branding. And my heart is definitely in graphic design. I have a real love for the visual storytelling that we get to do with a company. So yeah, so that's a little bit about my work life. And then personally, I'm a mom of 2 beautiful boys. And they are 3 and 6 months, which just means that we live in the chaos, right? There's not a single day that goes as it should be planned, but we thrive in that, and our life is beautiful, and we're very happy.
Yes. And it is hard to believe 10 years. Wow. Where have those 10 years gone? We could just reminisce from where we were when you were first coming in to where we're at now. And it has been such as you said, beautiful journey. And it's been such a pleasure having you on the team. And really, like most doctors who are out there listening, it's so much fun to start a business and then to watch it grow and to have team members that can grow with you. And just looking at when I first started, it was just me, and then it was Jordan, and then you, and just slowly adding a team. And now we've got management level, director levels within a company, and how fun that is. One of the things that I want to just start off with is I want to talk a little bit about, and we're going to just go heavy into branding a little bit, because you really are the key. You really help our business have a strong presence. And I talk a lot about with doctors about brand confusion, and just
Yeah.
there's so many places that we can put information out, but it can feel very disjointed. And I feel like you're the glue that holds JANA together, when whether it's what we're putting out on when I'm out there speaking, or what's going out from the visual component of the social media piece to the attire that we wear. And so I'm wondering if we can just talk about the word storytelling and what that means in marketing. And if you can talk, let's just take a little journey in history, just even about, we'll be vulnerable with JANA and talk about how that evolution has come about. Because gosh, if you were to look back at where I was the one who made my brand in PowerPoint, if you can believe it. And what I was doing 18 years ago to what we're doing now is very different. So for anybody listening, you will always improve, especially if you surround yourself with great people. But let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I love that this is where we're going to start with this, because there really has been this wonderful evolution of growth in the business, like on the consulting side, but also in the branding. And I think that what we saw is that they go hand in hand, right? And that's where, if you are a doctor and you're starting to dip your toe into starting your own practice and you're starting to get things going, it's so important that you know that there has to be cohesion across your entire business. And this isn't just about like the marketing fundamentals and like your internal processes. It's about all of the spaces where you are a visual company. So I think when it comes to JANA's branding, right? Like when we had first started, it was a logo.
3 dots in a line. Three dots in a line.
And we were like, yes, this is great. And we ran with that. And it took I wouldn't say a lot of time, but it definitely took some really intentional processes on our part to be like, okay, what does this logo stand for? And what does it mean? And what does it mean to our company? And more importantly, what does our audience need it to be? And I think that when we think about branding and a lot of brand confusion, we often tend to forget that like your brand has to be what your audience needs it to be. Is one of the most powerful things that we tend to forget when we place ourselves at the center of a brand, is that it has to be authentic to you, but it also has to be an authentic experience for the target audience that you have, right? You have to incorporate what they need out of your company into your branding. And so in JANA's history, right, when we had started with a logo, we've had this blank slate on what a lot of this was going to look like. How are we going to evolve into what it was that our audience needed us to be? And so you work through those processes on the consulting side of things, where we're figuring out what packages we want to be able to offer and how things are going to shift over there. But on a forward facing level with our marketing, it took a lot of thought around what is our messaging going to be? What is our authentic storyline? And how are we going to incorporate that into our different platforms? So I think with storytelling marketing, and I should say before we get too deep into this, for anybody who doesn't really know what storytelling marketing is, right? It's about cohesion, but it's really about crafting a narrative around your brand and your company that helps your target audience to relate to what it is that you do. So your services, your product, whatever that might be. And there's a lot of implications for doing it wrong. If you're if you're missing the mark, if you don't have it figured out, there's a huge opportunity there that you're missing out on when we're not crafting something that is relatable to the people who are in front of us. And I think for orthodontics, I think Davin from Wild Smiles just talked about this on an episode a little bit ago about creating an authentic experience in your practice and how you need to use that as a marketing tool. And he's so right. He's so spot on with that. It's about being what your audience needs you to be. And that authentic experience, you have to make sure that it's seamless across the internal parts of your practice. When a patient walks in the door, they've got to get the same feeling and the same experience as they receive when they go onto your website, as they do when they jump onto your social media pages. And I think that the really cool thing about storytelling in marketing is that as humans, we are so primed to receive information in that way. So much of human evolution has been centered around stories being passed down from generation to generation. And so whenever we are faced with making a decision on a purchase, especially a larger one, it's really easy for us to buy into a story rather than just a product. Yeah. And so when we're talking about where JA&A has come, it definitely, we've honed in on launch your vision, shape your future, right? Because that's what we believe in. Yeah. And we believe in consulting done different. We want to take a practical approach to practice management. These are all of the things that I'm sure our listeners have heard just from having contact through us through the podcast. The other thing about our brand that I think is really special and unique is obviously we have an amazing leader and the North Star of our company, right? She's our guiding light. And so it was really important for us to infuse your energy into the brand. And so obviously when you made your logo in PowerPoint, it was colorful, it was bright, it was so Jill. And so we had to take those elements and work with them because that was an authentic part of our origin story. Your whole story, which you've shared on the podcast, we had to have elements of that in all of the things that we were doing in order to make it relatable, because you are our face, you are our brand. And so we have to make sure that anytime somebody has a touch point with us, anytime that somebody is interacting with our company, that they feel that Jill energy. Across all of our platforms.
Yeah, I love that. And again, why I choose to surround myself with smart people, because I couldn't just do this on my own. And you've really helped bring that out. And I'm wondering, as you were saying that, if you were to talk to a doctor, because I think especially with startups, I was there, guys, I was there. It's so hard to know the Jill that I am now and the Jill Allen and Associates that we are now 18 years later is very different than the Jill that was starting going, I don't even know people in this industry, but I want to be a consultant. I have something here. And I think that's probably one of the scariest things for startup doctors, especially. But I also think for doctors who are coming in and doing an acquisition is, from a startup perspective, who am I? How do I do this? I might not even have really worked for myself. I've always been under somebody else's brand potentially. What does that mean? How do I know how to start setting my story? But also as an acquisition, I think sometimes it's somebody else's story. It's somebody else's brand. So I'm wondering if you don't mind just talking, you did great about talking about how we did it, but maybe just a point or two about for doctors that are startups or acquisitions in maybe just how do they kick off and knowing that it's going to evolve? Because I think that's the thing is it's not a stick it and pick it. Because if we stuck it and picked it 18 years ago, oof, we would not be where we are today.
Yeah, that's exactly it. When you're a startup and you're getting to pick your brand, I want to speak to startups first, because I want to say that there are so many marketing companies vying for your coin, right? And they all are going to offer you great services. And truthfully, we are fortunate in our industry where we have a lot of companies that are here doing really great work for our clients. But the thing of it is that nobody is going to look out for your business the way that you will. And it's really important that whenever you are sourcing a marketing company who's helping you with your branding or your digital ads or any part of your marketing efforts, that you're educating yourself along the way, because nobody's going to look out for your ROI like you will. So when it comes to dipping your toe and starting to get into your brand, if your brand isn't solid, if you're not getting an authentic brand that matches your story, right? So if your visuals don't line up with the story that you're trying to tell, your brand will feel messy. And so when you're working with these companies, I want to encourage everybody to be vocal about what it is that you want. And for as much as I can, and Jill, I know you and I have talked about this a lot, stop putting a tooth in your logo. Right? Because what does that say? What does that say to your demographic, to your patient demographic? It says that you're interchangeable, because if 4 other people in your area have tooths in your logo, it's not recognizable and it's not memorable. And that's really what you need to be searching for, is you need to be able to stand out and make yourself unique in your area. That's what makes a strong, recognizable brand. And for an acquisition who's already coming into some pre-existing branding where you're going to have to juggle what is already known about the practice, it's really going to be a slower transition. It's not going to be something that you can just flip overnight. You have to rework the biases that might already be in the community. And so I think that anytime that you are stepping into a new practice, their branding might look good. but is it authentic to you? Is it the
Mm-hmm.
story that you want to tell? Does it give off the visual representation of what you feel is important in your practice? Because I think that you have to start there. If you can pour tons of money into digital ads and you won't get anywhere if what they are seeing online doesn't match what they're going to get in the practice. If the digital ad is putting out a brand or a logo that's outdated, nobody's going to click on it. And so I think that you really have to start in this foundational area of identifying the brand that you have. Does it match what you want it to be? Is it a part of your story? Does it uphold your core values and your vision for the practice? And if it doesn't, you have to start in the brand, and you have to redo the logo, and you have to redo the colors, and you have to really think about the fonts. And I could nerd out all day on the intricacies and the practicality of what you choose and why. But it has to start there, because that's really where you're going to be able to create a brand and a practice that is something that people want to go to. It has to be unique, and it has to be authentic to you.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that. That's so practical. It feels sometimes it's hard. It's hard when you're starting up to know how to put your fingers on it. It almost feels like it's not tangible. Mm-hmm. I can say, having been a business owner that has started and gone through this process, that you also have to just be okay to voice your opinion with the people you're working with. Because even Jessi, you and I, we've went back and forth a lot on, I don't think that resonates with me, or I feel really good about mm-hmm. this or that. And doctors, I just want to tell you out there, empower you to have a voice. Just because you are working with a company or somebody that's smarter than you in a certain area doesn't mean that they always know best, and to be able to advocate for yourself. So let's jump back onto the storytelling. I know I took us on a rabbit hole there, but I just wanted to latch onto that for a minute. When we're talking about brand, and then as you were saying, the storytelling around your brand. And I think it's important for people to understand there are two different things. There's the brand component, our logo, how that all is going to look, and then the story around our brand. I'm wondering if you can talk mm-hmm. a little bit about, what are you seeing, or where do you think storytelling with brands are heading in the future?
Yeah, so this is a really great place to go. And I get really excited about this too, because I think that this is, I can nerd out all day on this kind of stuff. But so for a really long time, right, like we've talked about, storytelling has been a part of the human experience for a really long time. And I think it hit its peak probably in like the 90s and the 2000s. And I think a really good example of this. So did you ever watch American Idol, in its heyday, Jill?
Yep.
Who didn't? Everybody did. I can remember I think I was like 9, and I was like, Mom, we're not going to miss American Idol tonight. This was before you could stream it. You had to be on the couch ready to watch it. And one of my favorite parts of American Idol was being able to watch all of the auditions, because you saw the good, the bad, the ugly, the whole spectrum of what somebody could do with their voice and singing. And Simon Cowell, of course, we all watched it for that. I happened to tune into it probably 2 or 3 years ago. And it was so different in what I had remembered, because so much of what American Idol is now is storytelling, which is used in a way that I don't think a lot of people consciously realize, right? So now it's 2 seconds of auditions, and then you get this 5-minute backstory on the singer. And it's most of the time this gut-wrenching sort of story where you're like, oh my, you like want to sob and cry for them. And they're doing this because they want you to buy into that person and follow their journey throughout the show, because that increases viewership for them. And so what we see in storytelling branding right now is there's almost a little bit of a manipulative quality, where they're using stories at large to get people to buy into things by using these really like high-revved emotional sort of sound bites of things. And so what I think is happening is that when you are encountering something like that for so long on commercials, on your shows, on your different social media platforms, you start to get a little bit of like story fatigue, right? Where you're like, I don't want to listen to somebody cry anymore. Like I emotionally cannot do the highs and the lows with you this frequently all of the time. So when we saw everybody really dig into this storytelling marketing, that's where we landed, right? Is this like very tumultuous version of like, how do we get somebody to buy in? And it was a lot about playing and manipulating emotions. And then TikTok came along, and TikTok is different in the sense that you're getting a very authentic version of somebody's story. And so we become almost primed to sniff out when somebody is using a story to manipulate us, right? We have honed in on, wait a minute, like this doesn't feel right. And a lot of the times it's a subconscious gut reaction. It's why you scroll really quickly or you decide to turn off the show. But TikTok really opened a whole new portal to storytelling and marketing. And it's why influencer marketing has become so powerful, because we know if Simon Cowell got up and preached about how great American Idol was, we'd all be like, yeah, of course you like it because it benefits you. But with influencer marketing, you're getting a secondhand account of why somebody else thinks that your company is really great. And we buy into that more as an audience and as a consumer. We want to hear the unbiased version of the story and why somebody likes it. So with where it's heading, I do see that like Generation Z, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, they want to interact with brands in a different way than Gen Z or Gen X and millennials have. They are very invested in the, how do I say, the do-goodness of the company. And they can get into that because of social transparency through these social media outlets. And interestingly enough, right, like we get to see in real time what happens when companies set a storyline and they fail to uphold it, which you and I have talked about this, right? Which this story comes from a couple of months ago with Kite Baby. It's happened at the turn of the year, as in 2024. And I was pregnant at the time, so I was like all about the baby stuff. But for those listeners who might not know, Kite Baby was a company who was dedicated to selling mom and baby products for like basically 3 years and under. And this was a company whose entire brand story was focused on mom and baby first. We do all of these really great things for mom and baby. Our products are non-toxic and they're the best types of products for your baby. And then they had this employee who had adopted a NICU baby, and that baby wasn't able to be discharged or to go home for an extended amount of time. And so she had come back to the company and she had asked, hey, can I work remotely? Because you're a mom and baby company, right?
Hey docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence.
This is what we believe in. You should be able to support me in this. And they told her to pound sand. And it went viral. It went everywhere. And so for any company that is, or for any orthodontist that is out there and you're creating and crafting your brand story, you would better be able to back it up, because you have people who have a phone in their hand and a camera attached to it, and really a lot of access to how you do what you do. Yep. And they're going to call you out on it if you're not willing to talk the talk and walk the walk. So I think that there's like this really interesting duality when it comes to storytelling marketing, because we have to utilize it, but we have to utilize it very thoughtfully and very intentionally. And when you're crafting that brand, you really need to make sure that, with cancel culture being a thing, that you're prepared to stand up to what your brand says it will. I think whenever we're talking about really digging into brands and where those things are going, that's where my mind tends to lead. Like, we are going to, and right now we're talking a lot about the audio part, right? Like, we're talking about what are you hearing in the storyline, but there's also this really large visual representation of a brand that also has to follow through on the story and with what you say you're going to do. Because there are subconscious gut reactions that happen on a visual standpoint that we have to take into account when we're crafting these sort of things. And like I always think about, if you're a restaurant, like if you're in Thornton, Colorado, which is where I live, and there's a new restaurant going in down the street, and you're on your Facebook apps, you're next door, and you're like, oh, there's this great new restaurant that's going in, and everybody's talking about it, and the owner's, this is going to be this great high quality, high end steakhouse. I can like just picture like all of the brushed bronze elements all across the $50 a plate. And then you walk in, it opens, and you walk in and you get Gunther Tooties. Like you can't, it's a miss in the branding, right? Like the branding and the story and what you're promoting in your community has to match what they get when they walk in the door. So when we're going into the future of storytelling branding, we have to avoid that story fatigue. You've got to make sure that like your storyline is authentic, but it's not manipulative, and that you're also willing to back up whatever it is that you're going to say, and that your visuals match it.
Yeah. Oh, what's great storytelling there, great analogies there, Jess, because I think that really does help pull that together for us and what we're doing. And again, what we have done with JANA, what I see doctors who are successful at creating their brand story is you just cannot have that conflict. And, in past have joked about it as catfishing a little bit, which I know is an old analogy to anybody out there, but still we can't be saying one thing or presenting or being one thing and then patients come in and have a totally different experience in our practice and then expect that they're not going to share it. And I think that's the good and the bad of where we're at right now. Everybody has a phone with them and everybody has instant access. And I think the sad part is I see it's so much easier to put up a bad review than a good review. People will be like, oh, they were great, I love them. And in their minds, they're thinking how wonderful you are. But it's very hard for them to actually get on that phone and give that good review. But man, if they felt like they didn't experience what they thought they were going to get, or didn't have whatever they were looking for, it's really easy for them in the moment to be like, yep, here we come, Google, or here we come, phone out, let me take a picture of what I'm seeing here happen in the office. A cautionary tale for sure. So let's talk a little bit about, so we're setting the scene for the story of a business and laying some of this foundation for what we should be doing as business owners in getting our tale out there, we'll say. But let's talk about brand recognition and what that means to practice success or to a business's success. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, again, thinking that we've got a lot of younger doctors that are starting their businesses or people who are starting their businesses. Let's talk a little bit about what it means to become recognizable, because it just doesn't happen overnight. I would love to say it even from JANA, it took a long time for people to even be like, who is this Jill Allen and Jill Allen and Associates? What are these?
Who is she?
Yeah, exactly. What are these 3 dots in a line all about here? So let's talk.
Yeah, no, brand recognition is actually something that I was exposed to really early on. So fun story here. Back in the day when I was at the ripe age of 16, I worked at Starbucks. And at the time, this was like a cool job to have, right? Because I wasn't like flipping burgers at McDonald's. And so to me, I was like, I'm the barista at Starbucks.
I got a really big title.
I've got the cool title. Yeah. So the really cool thing that was happening at the time though, is I had worked my way up to a team trainer. And so they would come in and they would do these seminars about some of the company initiatives and what it was that was happening just in the larger corporate world in general. And at the time, Starbucks was going through a rebrand that I was working there. And I remember this because this was really my first sort of like introduction into the marketing world. And I remember thinking this was so cool. But Starbucks was trying to prove that their brand was so recognizable that they didn't even need to have the word Starbucks in their logo for somebody to recognize that it was the coffee shop. If you remember the old Starbucks logo, it used to be a circle and it used to say Starbucks coffee in it with some stars, and then the siren was always in the center. And if you look at the logo now,
Yep.
It's gone. It's not there. There is no Starbucks written anywhere on that cup. It's like on the back in a very small, but the point, it was such a power move at the time for them to be able to be like, I don't even have to have my name in the logo for you to have brand recognition. And so we see this in large companies like Nike, right? Like the swoosh. If you see the swoosh, what's Nike? You don't need to see Nike written out. And so I think when we think a lot about what brand recognition means, it's really about the iconography around the brand. What are the things that stand out that you use consistently that make the brand recognizable? Because it's very rarely just the name. It's usually an image, because that's just the psychology behind branding. So like for us, it's the 3 dots. That's what we try to use over and over again. And even more so for us in our JA&A branding, we focus on the colors.
Yep.
Because when I do a presentation for you, any of the listeners that have been able to witness a Jill Allen presentation, which is the design elements of those presentation, I don't put our logo on every single slide, but you should feel the brand on every single slide because I'm really infusing it with the colors. And so the same thing has to be done for practices on their social media, right? You probably don't need your logo on every single thing, but you do need your brand colors. You do need your symbols. Whatever the icons are that you're going to be using in your brand, those have to be the things that you're using all of the time, because that's what creates brand recognition. So I love using that Starbucks analogy just because it was something that I was privy to as it was happening. But I also think that there are other elements of what makes a brand recognizable other than just in taking another note out of the other industries who have already done this, right? Companies spend millions of dollars every single year into ensuring that if you go to Starbucks in Thornton, Colorado, you're going to get the exact same experience that you do when you go to Starbucks in Times Square, New York, right? There is something about the consistency in that too. If I go to Starbucks here, I'm going to get a green straw. I'm going to put it in my little clear cup, and I'm going to do the same thing in New York. And so that's what makes the brand recognizable, is it's the consistency in both the experience, right? The authentic experience and what you see visually. And that's where the story comes into play, right? Is the story is the makeup of all of those different things accumulatively. So I think that's a really important point to make, is that the aesthetic gets you really far, but you have to have the consistency in the experience in order to really make it recognizable. So yeah. That's sort of where my mind goes.
I love that. And I could just sit and listen. And I know we talk about these things all the times, but it is just, it seems so basic, and yet it's not. It's actually so intentional that it is basic, but it's so basic, but yet it's so intentional. And I think if doctors who are listening, if you'll just think about that, and when you're working with your team and you're working, whether you're starting off doing your social media and you're pulling all of your marketing together, because it isn't just social media. It's the scrubs that you wear. It's the tennis shoes, the branded tennis shoes that maybe you have your team, to when you're out and you're doing a community event and you're doing a tabling event. Is it that same feel, that same experience, that if somebody comes up and they're like, oh, that's my orthodontist, are they getting that same feel and look and consistency? Or does it feel like, oh, that's my orthodontist?
I think one of the really interesting things about our industry too, which is not something that you encounter in most other facets of healthcare, is that when you go to your primary care physician, there is an experience that you expect from there. And truthfully, it's probably not going to change much as time goes on, right? It is what it is because of insurance and things like that, because you have to go there. But at the end of the day, a lot of orthodontics, it is an electable procedure. So there is a sales and marketing element to this facet of healthcare that we don't really see anywhere else. So you really do get to create this really cool experience that patients don't expect. So when you are at the tabling event and they get to see their orthodontist, make it something special, because it's not what people expect.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just talk a little bit about strong branding. We've been talking about that already, but let's flip that switch a little bit and talk a little bit. How can poor branding affect what we're doing? Because a lot of times I have docs that are like, yeah, that's something I'll get to. Yeah, I don't really like to market. I don't see the value in paying somebody to do that. Can you talk a little bit about what, as far as how that really can affect a company, short term, long term?
Absolutely. And I feel so much for these practices having been in them, having done the whole consulting piece of this, like I understand that you guys have a million things coming at you every single week. And it can be really hard to know what to prioritize, where to put your money, what deserves your attention. As a business owner, I've seen just watching you, Jill, and knowing how complex these moving pieces are, right? Chess, not checkers. And there's a lot of that's going on. And like when we're thinking about the bad side of branding and what can happen if you don't adapt, my mind usually goes to the fact that the practices that are saying, I don't want to market, I don't want a brand refresh, they've usually been burned. They were burned by somebody. Somebody took their money, somebody didn't do a good job. And so we tend to we pull it in and we say, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore, or I'm just going to try to do it myself. And so I think for those types of practices who might have been burned in the past, I would just really just encourage you to take that leap of faith again and reach out to JA&A, because we're really good at being able to help you, put you in contact with the people who align with your goals, and especially in your marketing. We've got so many resources for doctors that can really help get them going in the right direction. But I would say that, do you know what the uncanny valley is? Jill, have you ever heard of that term?
No.
So the uncanny valley is like when we see something that looks human but isn't. And it's actually like psychologically really disturbing to us. And so like people really don't like it. And I think that the same thing happens in branding when it's something that hasn't had the attention paid to it. It's like the uncanny valley of marketing, where like you see a brand and there's just something that's not quite right about it. And it gives you this gut reaction where you're like, oh, I don't really know how I want to interact with this. And so I think it's so important that we dive in on those things and we really start by identifying how is our brand received, and so we can avoid that sort of uncanny valley effect that might be happening. So for doctors who are maybe tussling a little bit with their brand, I would also say that there's a lot that can be learned and done on your own. Like, we have so much access to great technology right now, right? AI is insane. And what AI can do for your marketing and your branding is something that we all need to be paying attention to, because there is a lot that you can do on your own and that you can learn on your own with very simple implementations. So you're never too stuck, and there's no brand that isn't worth taking a look at. And like you said, it's not like we don't just stick it and leave it and walk away. Like, you have to keep an eye on this over time, because the generations that you're going to interact with over the course of your practice are going to want different things from you. And as I've said, your brand has to be what people want it to be. So you have to keep your thumb on the pulse there. You have to be keeping a really keen eye on how it's being received. Does it look outdated? And is it translating across my platforms?
Yeah, that's great. And I think that kind of leads me into my next question, and just really talking about what you think contributes to a really strong, cohesive brand. And again, how do you keep your finger on the pulse of your audience, or have your team member who may be helping with you? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think it starts with really understanding your patient demographic. You really need to know who is in your area, because the branding and the marketing that's going to work for somebody that's in Texas is not going to work for somebody in Washington. They're just totally different spaces, and the people want different things from their orthodontists in those areas. So when it comes to creating a really strong brand, you've got to start there. You've got to know what people want from you. And then you need to craft a story that they can relate to. And in Texas, it might look something that's more family oriented. In Washington, it might look something if you're in the Seattle area, it might look something that's a little bit more posh and upscale, right? There are different narratives and different stories for what those demographics need that you need to start with. Then you're going to build a logo that relates to that brand, right? A very posh, clean, simple logo isn't going to fit with a storyline that's very family oriented. This is where brand confusion happens. And if I could just bop somebody on the head, stop using blue and green. Stop using blue and green. We see it everywhere. It's so overdone in ortho and dental. Use a bright color. And trust me, I understand the color theory and how different colors elicit different emotions from people. We're a little beyond that, because we interact with brands so much more now than we ever did before. In the 90s, when you went to a store, maybe 3 times a week, it was a different experience than it is when you're constantly seeing brands on your phone. Like, we can be a little bit more liberal with our color palette now than just blue and green. But to create that strong branding, like, you have to make sure that the storyline and the visuals match what your patients want it to be, and that you're really infusing that authenticity, whatever it is about you that you want to infuse into your practice, that you're sticking with that. And then I think that they're like, can I just give everybody some like really practical tips on like some of the elements to pay attention to? Because I think that this is really where, when I'm talking about how there's so much that you can learn on your own and nobody's going to care for your business the way that you are, these are the things that you can really easily take away and implement. This is the practical approach, right? That you can implement into your practice that will help you in branding efforts, whether you're starting from fresh, you're looking at a redo, or you have something that's really outdated. And that is, start with a mood board, start with a style guide.
Yes.
And for those of you who don't know, get a free Canva account. And it's basically like a little itty bitty, very easy to use version of Adobe. And it's super user friendly, but they have loads of style guides that you can start with in there, where you can pick your brand colors and put them onto the guide. What are your complementary colors, right? And have these things spelled out for your team. This is what gives you the real life consistency. And I think it's so funny that in our industry, we don't see this happening more. We don't see more style guides, because we tend to have turnover in our team members, especially on the marketing side of things. We really need something that sets the tone from person to person, or to when you're outsourcing your marketing efforts, so they know where to start. So get a style guide. You'll have all of your different like logo renditions, your colors, your complementary colors, the fonts that you're going to use.
Yes, so important.
And so important, right? The fonts that you're going to use on your different platforms, right? Because the font that looks good on your website might not be the font that you want to use on your social media. You have to take these things into account. And then you're going to pick your stock photos, right? Because that imagery is important. If they see those images consistently, right? Put it all in one place, so that way it's really easy to see exactly what it is that somebody should be using. And once you put all of these elements together, it's called a mood board for a reason, right? You're going to get the vibe that this puts off. And so if you're in that middle of life practice where you have a brand, but you're not really sure if it's hitting its target audience anymore, put the mood board together. What do you feel? Ask your nieces, your nephews, your family, your friends, your peers. What do you get from this mood board? And does that align with what you want it to be? Because that can be a really easy way for you to tell if it's time for a brand refresh or not. I do think that there's something to ensuring that when you are redoing your brand, if you are having somebody like re-mock this up for you, make sure that things have balance to them. Visually speaking, we are primed to want to see symmetry. It's such an important part of the way that we do things. Even look at my background. I've got 2 chairs like perfectly centered behind me. Symmetry. You do too. It's just a part of what we're drawn to. We see this all the time in architecture too. And we know orthodontists love symmetry, right? That's your profession.
Yes. They're like, scoot that chair a little bit to the right. No.
That's a millimeter off. It's something that we tend to forget about, these subconscious reactions when it comes to our branding and our marketing. So make sure that your logo has balance and symmetry, and that when you step back, I always tell everybody, put the logo up on the screen. Now step back. Is it still legible? Do the fonts still read the same way if you step over to the side? Does it look the way that it does when it's this close to you on the screen? Because there's different iterations that we have to have with our branding and our logos in that way. The other thing is contrast. Contrast is so important, especially on social media, because we tend to we get these feeds, right? And if you see a graphic that is cluttered, you scroll right past that. You're not going to take the time to figure out where and what and how and what's going on. That it has to be simplistic. So I always like to say use the 60-30-10 rule. And so that 60% of the graphic needs to be negative space. Okay, so that is nothing on it. 30% needs to be a complementary color or a primary color in your logo, and then 10% should be a complementary color. And that sort of gives the right visual representation, enough breathing room that when somebody is scrolling, right, because you've got 3 seconds tops to stop them, to get them to interact with your post, that they are stopping and they're able to quickly decipher what it is that graphic is saying.
Yep.
This is So important visually. I always say that fonts are like the body language of the brand, right? Because you and I are talking, yes, right? We're having a conversation, we're hearing what each other is saying, but we're also intaking all of this information by the way that I'm talking with my hands, you're nodding your head. There are all of these unspoken cues that happen with body language. And fonts do the exact same thing, right? So like, you're going to read text, you're going to take it for what it is, but the font gives off its own vibe. And so it's really important not to underestimate the power of a good font. And I always use this example, right? So let's say I handed you a little note, and it said, I've been admiring you and I'll be in touch soon. And it's in this really pretty loopy cursive. What do you think when you get a note like that, Jill?
I think, it's got the hots for me.
Secret admirer. Exactly. I'm coming over for drinks. Right. That's exactly like, you're like, oh, okay, someone is admiring me. Now, if I gave you the same exact note, but the font was like scratched red, blood looking writing, serial killer vibes, right? Emotions. And so we have to be really conscious about what we're using because it will matter on a very subconscious level, right? The uncanny valley of marketing happens here when we're not paying attention to the way that the vibes that things put off. A couple of other just really quick little practical tips, right, is the rule of three, right? So the rule of three is that people love to see things visually in groups of three, which is so perfect because our little logo is three little dots. Jill, were you subconsciously doing something? Oh, I don't know. And we see this a lot in text, right? Because you'll have a heading and then typically a subheading. And then there's the body of information, right? The body paragraph. Groups of three. That's how we like to consume information. So for anybody who's out there that's, oh my gosh, I just don't even know where to start with this post, this graphic, whatever it is that I'm doing. Rule of three, heading, subheading, body. 60-30-10 rule. You're going to get yourself a good graphic and it's going to be a lot more consumable for your audience. The other thing too to keep in mind is that people scan information in the shape of an F, right? So we read left to right, and then we go down, next line, left to right, and then down again. The way that social media has impacted how we consume content is really intense, right? Like you probably have noticed this, like the way that like news articles are written now are so vastly different than the way that they used to be written 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we used to get these really lengthy, like very drawn out, here's what's happening and 10 other things that might relate. And that's just not the way that we consume content now. Most of the time, it's best to do it via video. But if you are going to do something written, it has to be short and to the point. It's bullets. Yeah, that's the best that you can do. So when you're thinking about your visual representations of your brand, take those things and start there. Like, what does my content look like on my social media? And is it consumable? And is it visually appealing? And not just to you, right? Because you're not your audience. Somebody else is your audience, right? So this is where we have to pull the ego back a little bit, right? Yeah. If what I think looks good doesn't resonate with the people in my community, it's not right. You can't do it. You can't do it.
Yep. Oh, such great little tips of advice there. And I'm sure people are going to be rewinding, writing, rewinding. And I know that's an old phrase. That's Jill old school right there. Okay, let me write that down. That was great. And again, I just appreciate these are such practical tips, but they really easy things to do, but really make a difference. And I love that you pointed out, and I know a lot of my doctors that have worked with me have heard this, but you guys can do this on your own. It's great if we need to. It's great. There are a lot of great companies out there that can help with this, but with a little bit of training, a little bit of sweat equity into learning about this stuff, you can do it. And I think the most authentic marketing that we do is marketing done by ourselves versus somebody else trying to get a feel for what works or what they think is your vision or your brand. As we start to wrap things up here, I'm wondering if you can just talk. I know you did, if there's anything else, you already alluded to some real practical points here, but if somebody, orthodontic practices are looking to refine their brand and maybe create that lasting impression on patients, what advice would you give them?
If they're looking to create that lasting advice or that lasting impression, and this is difficult for me because there's so many things that I want to say about it. My mind goes a million miles a minute. I think that there's something to really scaling back and starting at the beginning. and really taking into account what it is that you want people to hear from you. And you're right. Don't underestimate the power of DIY. Like I said, there are so many things that you guys can do now organically with the technology that you have available to you that really helps set you apart from your competitors. But I think if you want to build a strong brand with a lasting impression, it has to be unique. It has to be unique. You cannot be interchangeable with the person down the street. There's just too much competition coming into our industry with the way that birth rates are declining. And it makes sense that we would feel this first, right, out of other industries, because our bread and butter has been children. And so we're going to start noticing those pinch points a lot sooner than other industries will. But you have to be able to stand out from your competition, and you have to create value in your product and in your service that isn't the same type of value as the guy down the street or the girl down the street, right? Like, you have to stand out on your own right. If you can stand out and people will remember you, that's the key. That's the key. And it starts with a good, authentic story, and it starts with the right visuals to back it up, and consistency across your platforms.
Yeah.
That's what you need.
Yeah. That's great. As we finish up here, Jess, this has been great. And it's so much fun to get to highlight the smart people on my team, you definitely being one of them. And just to get to talk about, this is a lot of times I joke with my docs, this is sometimes that unsexy side of our business, right? Who really wants to have an hour-long conversation about your brand and marketing?
Right.
But on the other hand, it is such a key component. And it is something I think to get excited about, because when it all comes together, I can tell you, everyone listening, as a business owner, again, like, I am so proud of where my brand is now. And we're continuing to tweak, but it's so much fun for me to be able to stand up on stage and know that my brand is coming through in my presentations, or be able to put posts out and I don't have to be even part of a post, and yet my brand is shining through, or from the stickers that we do, or the colors that we choose when we're at a conference, to people will come up to us and they know my team without knowing my team. And I think that's so much fun. And I hope for anybody that's listening that this has inspired you. And how fun is it for you when you can get out there and your team is going out to lunch and they know it's your team without you even having to be there? They don't have to read the logo and be like, now what orthodontist office is that? You know what I mean? Like, they just know it because they know your brand, and what a fun thing. So if somebody wanted to learn more, you've given us such great tips, but if somebody wants to learn more about marketing and branding, and I just want to tell everybody, Jessi is usually always at the conferences with me, and look on our website, you'll see where we're going to be throughout the year. But first, I want to put it out there. Jessi is a wealth of knowledge. And if you can corner her at a conference, definitely do it. Pick her brain. I bring her to these conferences for a reason. She's always there. But if somebody wants to learn more about marketing and branding, where might you suggest they start?
Yeah, I'm always happy to have a good old-fashioned branding conversation at any conversation. I live for this stuff. So yeah, let's talk. And like I said, I think, truthfully, this is going to sound silly, but there's so much that you can learn on TikTok. There is so much that you can learn on social media. You just follow the right creators and I would give you a list of creators, but truthfully, you have to find the ones that resonate with you. You have to find the ones that give off the same vibes that you want to give off. There's social working to be done, in the sense that find branders, find creative companies that you think do it really well, and they're going to give tips. They're going to tell you what they think, and listen and take the information. Orthodontists, gosh, school has been such an integral part of your life. So you guys are like the perfect little like funnels for information. Like, you're going to want to take in and continue learning. It's been a part of your life for so long. You're not going to stop now. Start with some of that stuff. Start really learning about your brand in an organic way through the outlets that you have so readily available to you, literally at the tip of your fingers. And there's so many books, like there's the storytelling branding books that are great, and they can give off a lot of really good knowledge. And then there's JA&A. And I think that we're really I think one of the best parts and what I love about our core values in our company and our branding is that Jill always says it's about goodwill. Yep. And we're always going to take our egos out of it, and we're always going to point you in the direction that is best for your goals and what is right for you. And so I think that if you're feeling stuck, or if you need resources, if you want to know like who should I outsource to, talk to us. We are a great resource for that because we're unbiased. We're not the ones that are buying for your coin for your digital ads. Yeah, come have a conversation with us.
Yeah, that's great. Jess, this has been such a treat, and I can't wait to have you on again. And again, just to share my smart people with my audience is pretty fun. So as we finish up, you don't escape this, I like to finish up Hey Docs with a speed round. So yeah. Are you ready? Okay, all right, here we go. If you could start any business right now, what would it be?
A marketing company.
Surprise. What's the best investment you've ever made?
My education.
Yeah. Oh, good. How do you handle work-related stress?
Escapism. I love to read.
That is so true. I definitely know that about you. All right. What's one trend in our industry that you're super excited about?
The use of AI. The possibilities are endless. I'm so excited for this.
Yep. And then as we finish up, what's the most valuable piece of advice you would give someone just starting their career?
Be careful who you talk about your goals with, because I think it's better to set a goal and achieve it on your own and then talk about your result than it is to talk with the wrong people in the middle of that process, because other people's thoughts, energies, and opinions will influence your results.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Jessi, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. And I am sure that our audience just got a ton out of this. So thanks for sharing your knowledge and being so good at what you do. And I definitely, we're going to have you on again, because I know people are going to be like, all right, give us some more info. Give us more. This was only a taster. So thank you so much. Until next time.
Thank you, Jill.